job, it can also be fun. I mean, I was delighted the other week in Cambridge when Tariq Ramadan, you referred to there, painted himself against my friend Fritz Borkestein, a very distinguished liberal Dutch politician, painted himself as the great proponent of European liberalism, and was so pleased to be able to stand up and say to the chamber, well, it's very nice to see Tariq, portraying himself as the embodiment of of European liberalism. Of course, a real liberal wouldn't find it so hard to condemn stoning, And it's just great seeing him squirm as he then tries to pretend that the video, which anyone can see on the internet of him saying that with Sarkozy, didn't happen. So it's not only bad news, but no, the specific thing on that, on your, as it were, the detractors thing, is that I think there are several things. One is, they say, I mean, these people really want to win, and they want to win mainly for basically religious doctrinal reasons, and often the far left commentators who attack you, it's basically a sort of religious kink they've got themselves. And I mean, there are several things to be said about it. One is, of course, that one could play the sort of Muslim Brotherhood trick on them. Occasionally, I feel like doing that, saying, look, if you think, Sam Harris, who, to my mind, I mean, you're here, but pretend you're not from here. I mean, to my mind, is one of the most liberal, sort of yoga-ish, meditative, West Coast liberal types I've got in my address book anyway. that might be because of my address book. But, if you think Sam Harris is actually gearing up for genocide and is, the embodiment of all that is hateful in the world, you should see what comes down the road. And I do sometimes. I mean, I think it's, as I say, it's too Muslim Brotherhood a trick to pull off too often. But I think that is worth stating to these people in a way. It's possible, of course, that they know that to some degree, and they want to, rather like Russia and Bashar al-Assad in Syria, make the conflict to be between them and ISIS. As it were, that they would like it if they could clarify this debate, so that there weren't nuanced and thoughtful and informed people, and it was only them with their very radical views facing down, people who didn't have any of the nuance, didn't have any of the care in the discussion. And I sometimes think that is the purpose. They want to pick you off for that reason. But yeah, they're also I mean, I get this all the time. In the wake of the Finsbury Park attack, 3 Muslim organisations, all pretty radical, one of which is just a front for the Khomeinist cause, on BBC were allowed to describe me as a hate preacher. And the BBC subsequently had to publish broadcast an apology to me.
I saw that. Now, how did you extract that? Is that a manifestation of the difference between our libel laws? Because that struck me as a surprising moment, and of a sort that I have never experienced myself and never really pursued with much energy, because it seems so hopeless in the U.S. to do that.
Yeah, it may be that. I mean, I just think that, again, it's necessary to hold the line on facts. And if I did call for people to drive vans into crowds of people exiting mosques, then I should be called a hate preacher. But otherwise, it's a very striking and very serious accusation to make that suggests that instead of being allowed to voice my concerns and so on, I'm actually in recruiting people. I'm an Anjem Chowdhury-like figure, recruiting people for reverse jihad, as it were. And if it becomes a statement of fact, as it were, permissible on the national broadcasting channel, then that's sort of a different thing as well. Of course, it is the same thing. It's still people making an accusation, but I felt that a line had been crossed there. I think Majid did. And frankly, if I was a het-up young Muslim in parts of my country, and I was feeling, gun ready, knowing that the BBC was helping various pretty hardcore groups to basically focus the gun on me doesn't make me feel generous towards any of this.
It's extraordinarily irresponsible.
But again, maybe they just want that. Maybe it is that. I've often wondered that. I mean, if you have a sort of we've seen this with Charlie Hebdo and things, haven't we? I mean, basically, the people go into the offices and they gun a load of people down for blasphemy, and then really the hit is what comes after, which is that you don't have to do it again very much because everyone's learnt the lesson, and other people can come along and kind of say, well, for health and safety reasons, we'd rather not host you tonight. And it becomes in the same way. I mean, these people are riding on the coattails of the violent ones, and maybe they're very comfortable with that. Actually, maybe they're very happy with making people like you and me feel that we have, the people with guns after us. And maybe that's just their comfortable way of winning. They don't need to know them, but they happen to have the advantage of having a paramilitary wing on their side.
I'm sorry to say, I think it is that cynical and unethical. I mean, there's certain people who are just oblivious, perhaps, and there are no doubt liberals, non-Muslim liberals who just have some form of Stockholm syndrome, and they're not very thoughtful about what forces are at play here. But I'm confident that many of the principal people are quite happy to increase the security concerns of of the people they're pretending to merely criticize.
I've been very critical of some of the people you mentioned earlier and some of my debating partners. I'm very careful not to stand in front of them at things or say on social media, he is a jihadist. He is exactly the same as ISIS. I'm very careful about it, and it's not just for libel reasons. It's that I think there is a clear difference between some of the people I am an opponent of and some of the people I'm an opponent of who are jihadists. But if I did it now, those people would also have a legitimate follow-up one, which is, what if Douglas is lining us up in that way? And that's why I wouldn't do it. Long as the libel thing, and now that we know that, you could get a guy like this crazy, awful man from Wales driving a van into a crowd of, people leaving mosque, you'd be doubly careful in that environment.
Oh,
surely.
Yeah. On the single occasions, I think I can count on two fingers the number of times this has happened in 15 years of engaging these issues. On the single occasions where I have misstated one of my true enemy's position, however slightly, right? Just given a slightly off sense of what this person had been arguing for or believed, I have publicly apologized immediately, right?
And yet these people never.
Yeah, well, it's worse than that. They have never, in many cases, they have never attacked me for a view that I actually hold. I mean, they have 100% record of lying about what my views actually are. And it's asymmetric warfare. You have people who basically have no security concerns, right? Because they're not worried about atheists and Muslim reformers lining up to kill them, right? And who have no scruples going after people who have exquisite security concerns and who are playing by really the most scrupulous rules of intellectual discourse. It's completely asymmetric, and there's no sign of it changing. I want to just, I know we're coming up against a hard stop for you, Douglas. You're going to give a speech somewhere in London. You are the hardest working heretic in the UK at the moment. But I just want to ask you about this encounter between Piers Morgan and Tommy Robinson, which you must have seen. Well, first let me just ask you: is there any daylight between you and Robinson on these issues? Because he has been so well slimed by his opponents that I don't know what to think about him. I've never met him or dealt directly with him, but he comes to me just bathed in opprobrium. Feel free to describe what you think of him, but I want to say something about Morgan's performance there, because it struck me as one of the most shameful examples of sanctimonious bullying I've ever witnessed.
I haven't actually seen it. I've seen a clip of it. I was in the US when it happened. You get me on a very tricky question in many ways, because whenever I say anything about Tommy Robinson, I have the thing that you have with other issues, and everyone just wants to leap in and I look. One of the easiest things in Europe is what I describe in my book as going after secondary issues. So, for instance, the English Defence League, Pegida in Germany, and so on, and just totally crack down on and vilify and basically treat them with a different level of observation and honesty than you do other groups. So, for instance, the Manchester bomber, the Ariana Grande concert, seemed to have gone to a mosque locally, which had all sorts of things being preached at it. But basically, people didn't want to know about that stuff. We just don't want it because we're still, as we've said before, societally very badly set up for this argument. Whereas we're really good on, Nazism. I mean, we were quite good 70 years ago in Britain on Nazism, but, sort of culturally now across the board, thank goodness, we're pretty good on Nazism. The problem is that there are some people who, for my mind, for short-term political gain, as well as some people for long-term political gain, want to extend the borders of their definition to encompass pretty much everybody who doesn't agree with them. And if I can say so, I cite at one point in the book somebody in Germany I spoke with about this who just wouldn't believe that basically somebody without a PhD could have any say in anything to do with immigration or Islam without being a racist. And I interviewed Tommy Robinson when he left the English Defence League, and I'd followed their activities with great interest whilst he was running it. And there are all sorts of things. I don't believe in street protests. I don't like street movements. I think, among other things, it's because you don't know who you're going to attract. You can attract very bad elements, particularly in Europe. And basically, you hold the can for the whole thing. You if it goes wrong and somebody burns down a building, you screw everything. And so I think it's a very unwise thing to do. But I also recognize that there are people who have great concerns about their society and do not, have the access to the media, for instance, that I have, or the voice that I have, and so on. And I think people should be very careful before, scorning anybody who doesn't have their privileges, basically. Not to get all kind of left-wing wankery West Coast University on you. But I mean, there was this confrontation with Piers Morgan which totally played into this thing because we've never had, as far as I can remember, an imam or something invited onto a mainstream program from a mosque that a bomber has gone to and have the treatment of them that Piers Morgan gave to Tommy Robinson. And I don't know everything he's ever said in his life, but I've read his memoir and his very, persuasive story about his own persecution at the hands of the state, which I think was clearly a case of let's get to this person and shut him down in a way that they have really not done with numerous actual Islamic extremists and so on. So there is a disparity and an unevenness which is unjust, and I think certainly justifies the sense of injustice that Tommy Robinson and many others around him feel. And this Piers Morgan thing, so far as I could see, was Piers Morgan. I mean, he's not a very interesting thinker. He is a positioning sort of figure, and since his friend Donald Trump came to the presidency, has used the opportunity to sort of say some things about the Islam and the terrorism stuff, which is sort of, further out than he'd have done before. And my suspicion is he felt that he'd got a little bit ahead of the debate. And then after the attack, this Finsbury Park attack, chose to sort of regain some ground by just screaming at Tommy Robinson on air for live TV. I think that's what happened. But as I say, you've seen it all, I haven't.
Yeah, well, people should watch it because it's one of those moments where the hypocrisy and the unwillingness to speak seriously about a very serious issue just it crossed every conceivable line for me. I mean, it just seems like it should be one of those career-ending moments.
I mean, we go back to that point, though, if I may make it quickly, which is that, as I understand it from a bit of the thing I saw, one thing was that Tommy Robinson was trying to point out, by the way, I mean, we don't really, again, I mean, there's a trial that's going to happen of this guy in Finsbury Park. We don't know exactly what he was trying to do or what he was motivated by, or, I mean, I think we can take a guess, but, I mean, we don't know what the wider circle was and so on. I think Tommy Robinson tried to make the point that, I mean, if it was me, so if I back up, I don't think I'd have made the point on that particular day. But what Tommy Robinson seemed to be doing was just saying, look, this mosque that was certainly for a period of time a major recruitment centre for extremists and terrorists, and which was then, in the early 2000s, at one point cleaned up and handed over, by the way, to the Muslim Brotherhood, and including Hamas, senior Hamas figure, would not be my... I mean, look, we should be able to simultaneously say, don't ever carry out acts of violence on members of the public, and don't kill people or mow them down when they're just innocently leaving mosques, and also say it's not great that the leadership of an institution might have connections to a terrorist group like Hamas. And it's sort of a demonstration of the paucity still of the argument. I mean, as I say, to some extent, this is a timing thing. I don't think that's the argument to have in the hours and days immediately after people are mourning somebody who's been killed, murdered, and others who've been injured. But you could have that conversation at some point if there weren't so many people just determined to use all of these things to avoid such discussion. And it's very disconcerting that we're still there, you know.
The part of the video I saw was just Morgan hectoring Robinson to have some respect over the Quran, and any comparison to Scientology was blasphemous. I mean, basically he's in favor of blasphemy laws. Essentially, was the implication of.
Yes, this, if I can say so, Sam. I mean, this goes back to one of the core themes of my book, which is that the fact is that if we lived in a society which had the largest growing population in our society was Scientologists, if the largest growing religion in your society was Scientology, you might find it harder than you do to pick apart Scientology. And you know, I mentioned in my book that in the 1930s, Hilaire Belloc wrote a book called The Great Heresies, which included a chapter on what he called Mohammedanism, which is something which would put most of the writings of, you know, anyone who's regarded as an Islamophobe today, you know, it really looks, you know, makes Pamela Geller look like, you know, kind of soft stuff. Now, why did Hilaire Belloc not have to go into hiding in the 1930s in England after writing The Great Heresies? Because there was no meaningful Muslim population in Britain in those days. Why did Salman Rushdie have to go into hiding in 1989 after the Satanic Verses, which, again, I mean, way, way less than what Hilaire Belloc does, because by then there is a large Muslim community who might carry out the orders of the Ayatollah, and so on and so on. And by the time you get to where we are now, just because of numbers, as well as, you know, obviously devotion and devotedness and so on, but really just because of numbers, if you're Piers Morgan, I mean, it becomes plausible that you become, like, enormously defensive of the Quran. And that's not just a result of Piers Morgan's odd positioning. It's also, weirdly enough, a semi-rational calculation or act of calculation in a culture which, as I describe in somewhat remorseless detail in my book, is simply going that way. And, you know, it's about the facts on the ground. And that, by the way, so a final point of that is that when we, and I do quite a lot of it, lambast and joke about and ridicule politicians for, you know, not being stronger on some of this stuff. Now, I mean, you know, after 3 Islamist attacks and then 1 attack on a mosque, you know, you think maybe they do know that they're dealing with an even more combustible thing than we think they are. Maybe.
Yeah, well, that is more dispiriting stuff. It's it's a hard note to end on with you, Douglas. But I'm mindful of your schedule,
No,
and
I sort of, as an individual, I sort of think of myself as a rather, jolly person. My friends don't complain about me much, but yet I'm afraid that the facts we're all now living through are not the time to talk about, being an innate optimist or an innate pessimist. The facts that are emerging in Europe are very, very pessimism causing. And there's very little one can do about that, other than to remember one of my favorite quotes from Mencken, who said once, that human progress is very significantly made to the extent that one can believe in it. And I goes, it is very significantly made by jolly fellows heaving dead cats into sanctuaries and going loitering down the highways of the world. And anyhow, I always tilt my hat to you as a jolly cat heaver.
yeah, all in a day's work. Well, listen, Douglas, it is as always a great pleasure to speak with you, and we have to do it again because there are
Love to.
many topics we have not touched.
Well, can we agree to come back and do it soon?
Yeah, no, yes, this podcast is always open to you, so you should just know that. When you have an hour's worth of noise or more that you want to make, send me an email and I'll have you back on.
It's a deal.
Listen, keep it up, Douglas.
Likewise, don't let the buggers get to you.
If you're enjoying the Waking Up podcast, there are many ways you can support it at samharris.org/support. As a supporter of the podcast, you'll get early access to tickets to my live events, and you'll get exclusive access to my Ask Me Anything episodes, as well as to the AMA page on my website, where you can pose questions and vote on the questions of others. And please know that your support is greatly appreciated. It's listeners like you that make this show possible.
Hey Art, thanks. That's what I bitterly need right now in this moment. I really wanted 24, but it looks like I'll never get it. Oh boy. Yes, even you need to eventually de-rust this game. I'm not doing it for fun either. Oh god. Oh, if this is a PB, this is a joke. It was not enough help, but thanks. So close. For the longest time I've played without splits, so the gold times aren't like mind-blowing that I had 2 golds in this run. But god damn it. God damn it.
Have you ever had a dream that you had you could you do you want you could do so you do you could you want him to do you so much you could do anything?
I had that dream, but I had to give up on it. I hate video games, dude. I fucking hate them. How did I save 40 seconds on my last split anyway? Is that real? Is this happening? Compared to my PB? Are you shitting me? Like, are you like just taking my face and taking a dump on it? Oh my god. And I don't have frickin' music on because I've been listening to a podcast for the last 1.5 hours and it wasn't enough for the last 5 minutes of the run. And this stuff, which I like to keep the credits in the VODs. Oh, you're going nice. So you're going to commentate. Okay, that's cool. Almost more pressure on you during the commentating stuff than during your own runs, because I mean, you know how to do runs, don't you? But dude, giving good commentary for someone else that you like in front of 10,000 people. Sounds like fun. I'm sure it'll be okay. Oh yeah, and then there's also the in-game time. I wonder why they don't just take the in-game time out of the leaderboard anyway. In principle we could look for someone. I would be surprised if anyone who runs the game would be... I mean, I've asked once. Well, okay, I guess I asked whether someone was submitting, so that was a different question. I mean, we could. Personally, I found that during my ESA Germany run, doing commentary for this game wasn't that much of a problem. However,